Okay, we are really grateful to have you with us. My name is Paul Edwards. I direct Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young University, and we're delighted to be a co-sponsor of the Religious Freedom Annual Review and appreciate your participation and attendance. I am thrilled to be here with my colleague Jason Carroll. Dr. Carroll is the director of our family initiative at the Wheatley Institute. We have three initiatives. We have an initiative that works to find research-based methods to fortify the family, religion in society and human flourishing, and then constitutional government. And so anyway, Jason is the inaugural director of our family initiative. Let me just tell you a little bit about Jason. He received his PhD in family social science from the University of Minnesota. He's an internationally recognized researcher and educator in the areas of marital intimacy, marriage readiness among young adults. And there are more of them ready than they know, if I understand. The effectiveness of marriage education, and he does a lot on contemporary threats to marriage as an institution. I think we'll start going through the 60-plus peer-reviewed articles. I'll list each of them. Should we do that or move beyond that? But
I came to Wheatley to move beyond that.
And anyway, Carroll's research has been featured in places like The Economist, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Newsweek, USA Today, Psychology Today, NPR, and even The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, although I don't think you got on it.
Nope, he based a joke on one of our studies. So,
So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jason Carroll. So, by the way, so we are going to talk today. This is on the Practical Peacemakers track. I think that's what we're calling this. And we've put together, with the help of Utah State University, a tool for families to help in this effort to try to preserve peace. We think it starts in the home. And there's a lot of evidence for that. Before I jump into that, though, Jason, it's been a busy summer for you as a dad. Tell us just a bit about your family, and tell us what happened yesterday. I haven't heard the news, so.
we brought my fourth son, came home from his mission yesterday, so we got him home from the Philippines, and we're helping him deal with a little bit of jet lag today. But yeah, it's been a busy, but one of those just very joyful, busy seasons for us. My youngest daughter graduated from high school a few weeks ago, and we have 2 weddings this summer. So we're kind of moving one week to the next to these family events, but they're joyous gatherings for us. We're really excited about it.
And Jason, we're gonna be reminded, we're gonna have to, like, this is kind of directional, so kind of treat it like an ice cream cone, almost. So, well, we are excited to share with you a tool that was developed in part because of interaction with the National Governors Association effort to try to help us to disagree better. If you were with us, how many were with the session we had with Gordon Larson? A few of you, I see. Okay. So Gordon Larson was with us representing the Office of the Governor here in the state of Utah and the National Governors Association. This last year, they have put together an initiative that is focused on helping individuals not to necessarily agree or to avoid conflict, but rather recognizing that disagreement and conflict are absolute parts of our regular lives because people have their human freedom and their opinions and their approaches and their attitudes and their dispositions, that we need to learn to disagree better when disagreement comes up. So National Governors Association has been working on this at a level of thinking about policy and political conflict where that comes up in our society. And as we were consulting with them and having a desire to engage more in some direct family education programs, we recognized that the family is the best place for schooling and so on. And actually, I want to start there, Jason, as we jump into this. Why is it that, when we think about attitudes, dispositions, behaviors, that we'd want to look so closely at the family first as a potential area to work in?
Primarily because both in human growth and development and in priority, family is first. And so we know that for children, the modeling, the example, the patterns that they see. So in those conversations, as this was moving forward, there was a desire to say, what does disagree better look like across the kitchen table? And how do we move this from more than just a message that we can nod our heads to where there might be something that could be a call to action, right? And to get to that core and realizing that this is much, much more than an issue of just the moment or the time, but this is really a generational issue. How do we start to address and help and get inside the home? So yeah, you put first things first. And that is a part to look at. I've got a few slides too, Paul, at the right moments I'm going to pop in for us.
Yeah, let's do this.
To give people a bit of a sense, the curriculum is created around 3 lessons.
Okay.
Right? And so it is about looking at this example for children and giving ways for parents to have some tools, some exercises, some ways of interaction, some video clips, different ways to engage with children and inside of their home to make this a meaningful part of family dialogue and discussion around that.
Okay, so and this is, say a bit more about where. Let's go to the very beginning on this. And back to actually the development of it. I mentioned that we've done this in collaboration with Utah State. Say just a little bit about that collaboration, who we're working with there, and then where people can find the toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. As was noted on that front slide, and we'll come back to that slide as well too, in the growth of the project, we ended up collaborating with Utah State University's Extension Service. And if you're not familiar with Utah State's Extension, they are arguably the national leader, particularly in areas of family content and family education. And so they've devoted some really nice resources to the creation of using digital modules and education patterns. So as we reached out to David Schramm, Dr. David Schramm up there is one of the extension specialists and director of that work. They loved the idea. They came in on partnership around some of that. And David is also just a renowned parenting expert as well. So having worked in that area, there was just a really great collaboration, both in terms of content for the curriculum, but also some great resources to help make this available. And then the National Governors Association has become a real valuable dissemination partner to help us get this into as many homes and as much visibility so that parents can make use of the tool.
Okay, so at the beginning, what is the this? What are these lessons? And how would families start to use them?
Yeah, as we got the team of experts together and as we looked at what could be done, the first thing that popped up immediately was parent example, right? That parenting, often when we think about parenting, we think about what might be called direct parenting, when we think about teaching or interactions. But the experts have long recognized there's what we should emphasize often much more is what could be called indirect parenting. Even when parents don't think they're parenting, or they're not even with their children at that moment, children are watching the life examples of their parents. They're watching what they prioritize. They're watching what is important, where they put their time, right? Even when a child is on the other side of the room, a parent thinks they're engaging in their own activities or doing their own things. A child is always watching, is always learning, is always observing. So the starting point started to be, what could be the mechanism? So the program, the toolkit, got built around those two central ideas. How do we start first with the indirect parenting? Let's help parents start with a bit of a self-evaluation. Look at themselves, look at the example that they may be providing to their children, and then the other modules moved a little bit more into direct parenting, things you could directly teach and interact with a child around.
Okay, so when it comes to this concern around polarization and toxic kind of conflict, what are the parental behaviors that we might want to be concerned about?
Well, I'm going to jump up to our next slide. In that assessment, in that first module, we asked parents to go through and do an honest self-evaluation. I saw there was a session earlier today. Some of you probably were part of the Dignity Index that was talked about, that Unite has developed. We were inspired by that. It's a wonderful tool. So we created a parent self-assessment. These are just a few of the questions. I popped them on a slide because I thought it might be worthwhile for us to just pause for a moment, right? And the difficulty when we get to questions like this is there's a part of our mind that wants to answer them how we think we should or what we want them to be. But there's no score here. There's no test. It's not going anywhere, right? To just take a moment and say, can I sit honestly and pause and look a bit? And you'll notice that much of this is around behaviors inside the home, right? Often as parents and as adults, we get caught in a private-public split where we engage in kind of a public persona and a different private one. And children are often in a front row seat to observe that. How do we talk about others that aren't in the room? Even questions around when we're watching TV or watching the news and viewpoints and ideas are shared. How do we refer to and talk about other people? What kind of terminology and language do we use? And is that that's just an idiotic idea, or that's just the stupidest person, this, and the way they dialogue and have those patterns. So take a moment. That's the kind of the part of what this first module does, is gets all of us as parents to step back a little bit and say, do I find myself gossiping more than I would ever be really comfortable with? But I do tend to talk more about people than I do to talk with people, and those types of things. So yeah, that element, these become the behaviors we have to be very aware of. It does start at home. And if we convey a message that we can be different privately than we are publicly, that in and of itself is a pretty powerful message to children, that people can be disparaged, people can be treated without dignity. That's the great thing about the Dignity Index. It helps us think about our language along a scale from dignity that everyone is entitled to towards the other end, where we become quite contemptuous towards people, whether we know them or not. And this conveys a lot to children in how we do that.
And so, I think that this is very powerful to consider. Not that, obviously we want people to police their behavior in public. That in and of itself is a public good, right? That you can, maybe go back and grumble about stuff, but that grumbling gets picked up on by, children in the home. They can see that duplicity. That is the root of that word, is that there are two different kinds of behaviors. There's a public and a private one. My grandfather was a rancher in southern Utah, and he used to love to curse Bob Welty. I don't know if you remember who Bob Welty was. Does anyone remember Bob Welty? He was the weatherman on KSL, and Bob would share something, and my grandpa would curse about it there. But anyway, but Grandpa was bilingual. He was a bishop, and he told us, he said, you need to learn to be bilingual. He said, there's one language we use on the ranch and another one we use at home in church. So anyway. But you're saying we should try to harmonize those behaviors.
Well, and to be very mindful about how much our example matters. And again, it's an example even when children aren't present, right? What do my parents spend their time doing? What do they prioritize? What do they see as important? That indirect parenting is kind of a constant pattern. And we know that the old adage, right, of, do what I say, not what I do, doesn't really work. So that model has it. And that first module is really trying to help us as parents think about, do we help our children see others and really humanize them, see people behind problems. And so there's a lot of ways that kind of primes the pump for us as parents, as adults, to give some real thought to our examples, which helps prepare then for the later parts of the toolkit.
Okay, so let's
that moves into direct interactions with kids.
So let's jump into that. So the next couple of modules now, it's more, so the parents are largely going to encounter this as initially a self-assessment, and then they have some modules they can work with their children.
Yeah, and the next two modules really break down primarily into interactions inside of the home. So it becomes, how do we handle disagreements and differences and conflict inside of our home together as a family, between siblings, parents and children? How do we help create an open dialogue as a family about setting some family parameters and rules? There's a fun lesson that leads through of helping create that together as a family, where you can have a refrigerator magnet type idea of, hey, let's remind ourselves that, hey, in our family, right, we're going to make sure that we learn to work together, or we take turns in listening, or ways to create that. We know for children, particularly as they're young, as they're moving along, if we can kind of coin phrases and principles and ideas and give that a bit of language that we can return to. Hey, remember when we talked about no violence in our family? Right? Well, when we start squabbling over the toy and we move to then physically trying to resolve this, that's not our pattern. That's not our direction. But it's also a part of helping children. I should mention this too. The toolkit makes efforts where it diverges at places where parents can customize a bit to the age of their children. Because we know that ultimately dealing with 4-year-olds, 14-year-olds would be a distinct and different part. So there's some parts there where it helps parents choose what might be a little more age appropriate for my child and move it in a bit of a younger child direction, or move it more towards teens and some other types of issues and discussions.
So Jason, just give me a sense, if I'm a busy mom or dad, how much time is this going to take?
That's a great question, right? And we know that we need some flexibility in that. So that's one of the real beauties of self-guided education like this. So it's broken into 3 modules, and each of the modules, if you went just from start to finish through the module, you'd probably be 20, 30 minutes or so there. Just in digesting that alone, and then definitely if you tried to take it to the family, it'd be more time than that. But each lesson gets broken down into little sub-modules and subsections. So you could also just sit back and say, hey, I'm going to move through this one this week, and take 5-10 minutes each day, could get into different parts and pieces, and then select what parts would be most applicable for a family. Oh, I really like that video piece. We're going to bring that little video out and share that one in a discussion as a family. Or, hey, I'm going to use this little conversation guide during a mealtime conversation, and I'm going to bring up a few things to talk about. And there's even some times where you might want to bring a child and actually go, there's some games and ways that you click and things will kind of move around and facilitate that conversation. So, but it's really adaptable, very adaptable. It's just always there and accessible, that it can be broken down in those ways, that it doesn't have to be so much that it doesn't fit into people's schedules and lives.
And so tell us a bit more about Module 3 then. So we talked about disagreement in the home.
Yeah, as we
potential there.
move to outside the home, we play with a bit of this distinction of what we call of helping children. So outside the home, we start to move into the school context, we move into the neighborhood. We should mention too, even back in the parent, where we talked about public, private. We also live in today's world where we've got to put this unique element of our online interactions, right? Is that public or is that private? What we find is that it's very public in how it's perceived, but many of us tend to behave in more of a private. We'll say things when we think it's anonymous, when we think that the other doesn't know. So comment boards and message boards and social media sometimes is where we can really see the worst of us coming out. So in this third module, what we try to do is a bit of a distinction of helping children learn to be, what does it mean to be a nuclear reactor in those social situations versus being what we call a first responder. And nuclear reactors are, of course, going to be reactive. They're going to be emotion-driven. They're going to be, right, where first responders is a bit of a pattern of where we help encourage children to pause, to take a bit of a pattern of guiding them through a template. And of course, this isn't something that's just going to happen immediately, but with some repetitive coaching and a bit of a structure to it, we can help see where children can think about situations inside of a school setting, among their friends. Maybe it's time for us as a family to reflect a little bit about how we treat the referees at the youth sports event. All these ways that we engage. The other thing that I do want to highlight is occasionally we've had people hear about the program and they get a little nervous or they make the assumption to say, well, I want to teach my kids real values that are very important to me, and I don't want them to negotiate their values, right? And I always want to emphasize to them, always remember the program is called Disagree Better, not Don't Disagree or Never Disagree. This isn't about not having values that we see are very valuable and important, and that we teach children those things that we see as truths, things that we see as significant. But it is recognizing, as the other sessions and panels have talked about, how important is it to be able to share and engage with others in better ways. And as children start to move into those junior high and high school years in particular, much of this starts to become really critical for them.
And you did say there are age-appropriate kinds of examples in it. There's kind of a pathway with it? Or?
Yeah, and then you get to some different points where you can see this one little snippet I have on the slide, right? It talks about teaching your children the value of kindness and empathy, and then you'll see that if you have younger children, you can click into an example and a vignette that you would share with them versus a vignette that you might have for older children. I'm going to see if I can get really bold here, Paul. I did grab one video snippet for us.
Great.
So we'll see if technology smiles on us, and I'll share you a little example of this. And this is one of the ones that can be shared with children to then be a conversation start and a prompt for some discussion.
Marcus is a 14-year-old boy who is passionate about both playing and watching sports. He also loves to talk about sports with anyone who will listen, except for Trevor in his math class. Trevor also loves sports, but Marcus and Trevor cheer for different professional teams that are rivals, and both think their team is the best. Marcus and Trevor often get into disagreements and argue about everything from which team has better players, a better coach, and even better uniforms and mascots. As the weeks went by, their disagreements and arguments got more heated and intense. One morning, as Marcus walked into school, Trevor saw Marcus, and knowing that Marcus's favorite team lost their game over the weekend, Trevor started calling Marcus hurtful names and making fun of Marcus's favorite team. How would you feel if you were Marcus and someone was treating you this way? How would you feel towards Trevor? Point out the common feeling of internal irritation and even anger are common feelings. Later that day in math class, Marcus noticed that Trevor wasn't there. He asked some of his classmates where he was. Then someone told Marcus that they heard Trevor's mother was hurt in a car accident and Trevor was at the hospital with his family. How do you feel about Trevor now? What changed? Why? Sometimes when we have disagreements and conflicts with other people, we see them as our opponent or even our enemy. perhaps even as an object or obstacle in our way. We may only see them as mean and frustrating and avoid them at all costs. But when our understanding and awareness changes, such as discovering that Trevor's mother was injured in a car accident, then we often see the person differently. We see there is a person behind the problem. We see they have feelings. We realize they are sad and hurt inside, and we notice our own feelings have changed. We may have a feeling of empathy and compassion, and may wonder what it would be like if our own mother was seriously injured. The car accident likely won't change either of the boys' favorite sports team. The differences will still be there, but it may change how they treat each other when they disagree. It's easy to get caught up in differences and disagreements. We can change how we view others and how we treat others. We can view irritations as invitations for understanding and compassion. We don't have to agree with others, but we can remember that all of us are humans and deserve to be treated with respect, even when, and especially when, we are treated poorly and disrespectfully.
Okay. Is that going to win animation awards, do you think?
That's one of the great things about the model that they have up at Utah State, right? Is that they help move things into that digital platform and let you do those types of things. But it's engaging for children. It ties into things that they're used to. It may not be that highest level animation type of thing, but the engagement in the dissemination is
yeah,
really
and
compelling.
easier than just trying to put text in front of them, right?
Or hand them a PDF or those types of things. And so there's a combination here too of some videos that are kind of more for parents to reflect on, and then there's others to take and particularly share with the child and start the conversation.
Okay. Well, listen, and by the way, this is under development. It's available. It's at US, what's the?
Just popped it up, so we've
Okay.
got our slide there. So if you can either scan the QR code there, that'll take you directly to the website. We've housed this at Disagree Better at usu.edu, so it's together on their suite of family offerings of other programs and offerings inside of the extension, and then we link to it, of course, off of the Wheatley website and the National Governors Association as well, to just help this be available and be a resource, to just keep that conversation, let children know that this is really important. How we treat people matters. And that it matters to us as a family, it matters to us as a parents, that they see that and they hear that from us. And then also as parents that we have the courage and the strength to apologize and to acknowledge to our children when we're not the examples we think we should be. Many parents are afraid that somehow that will undermine parental authority if they do that. The research is very clear. To appropriately acknowledge to a child when we didn't live up to our own value, to our own standard, we didn't handle a situation the way we thought we believe we should, to return to a child, particularly as they get older, and to let them know, I've reflected on that interaction, and that wasn't who I wanted to be. That's not the example I'd like to set. That too is powerful, because we're all going to learn by mistake here. We're all going to have times that have situations we wish we handled better. To have children help them see how you can repair, how you can go back to, how you can acknowledge and take responsibility and make commitments to be better, that too is really beneficial for kids.
Okay. Well, listen, we'd love to hear your question. Jason, we have a few questions out here. So right up front, right in the middle here. Yeah.
Thank you. Two questions. First one is, can you tell us more about the Wheatley Institute's involvement? What was your role in bringing this out? And the second is, how are you getting the word out? How are you marketing this to families and community leaders?
So Wheatley's role is we came on board with the connections first with the National Governors Association, so we definitely took the role of kind of managing and spearheading that. David Schramm and I took the first stab at the development of the content of the program. So we built out the content together and built the modules together, and then brought on other parenting experts with advisement and consulting, so they weren't looking necessarily just at a blank slate, and they could say, oh, hey, I'd word this differently, or have you thought about this principle and idea and this area of research, and what about Miriam Underwood's research at the University of Texas? That's so good on social sabotage, and those types of things. So we helped both with content and management. Right now, we really targeted trying to help and support the effort of the National Governors Association this year, because as we know, they have an annual platform that will switch and pivot in another direction here. But our main effort too has been through our own communication channels at Wheatley, but then the USU Extension Group has a pretty extensive way that they disseminate not only in the state of Utah, but many extension agencies reach into Utah State and bring content to their states. And Utah State's been working with letting those states also personally brand. So if they want to bring that to Tennessee and make this Tennessee's Disagree Better program, that's what Extension's all about. So we're helping them kind of put their nameplate and their front place on that so they can push it out through their channels.
Right up front here.
I'd be interested in your
In the middle?
perspective from, can we have you, sorry, it's recorded.
I'd be interested in your perspective on a little clip I saw from a show of The View. And they had Dr. Ben Carson there, and he's very dignified and kind. And they were really harassing him about supporting Donald Trump. These women said, one of them said, how can, you've seen what kind of person he is, how he calls people names and this and that. How can you support him? And he said, or do you support that? And he said, no, of course I don't. I support some of his positions, and I feel like his positions and his policies are good, but no, I don't support those negative, the disrespect for women or vulgarity or whatever. And they said, but how can you support the way he acts when you are so dignified and kind? And he said, look where it got me. So, as far as the political realm, I just, I thought, wow, he's a smart man, and that's an observation, and maybe it's more of a comment on our culture, but how would either of you address that? Why do we choose, or why do we not embrace the leader like Ben Carson?
So, when we look at the literature on values, it's quite interesting. We actually, as humans, share a lot of common values, and yet they map differently for us. That fairness for someone might be a preeminent value, and honor might be another. People will value fairness and honor, and yet in one person's value map, honor may be ahead of fairness. And so sometimes we find ourselves in this complex time where people, are responding to different messages in a way where it's, our family's been offended, our honor has been offended, we will step forward and fight for that. Others might see a situation and it's like, let's try to be fair in this situation. I mean, they may approach it slightly differently, although they share similar values, they rank them differently, is what I'm trying to say. And so sometimes trying to understand that value map of one another is one of the things we need to try to emphasize. And I know I'm sort of dancing around the question, but I think this is one way in which a lot of people are structuring their choices. And when we're given in a political situation a binary choice, this becomes very complicated to sort through how to rank certain kinds of values, right? So,
and I just want to make one quick comment, was on your idea about the media. There's another area of parent example. Unfortunately, we see that polarization, conflict, confrontation is now a formula for media. right? Shows are created to intentionally be, let's not sit and have a civil dialogue. Let's not have a Ben Carson dialogue. That's boring, right? It's got to spark. It's got to
Yeah.
flash. It's got to be confronted. So we need to be mindful. We may not be able to shield children from all of that, but to step back and say, what did you think about that? And how did you feel about that? And let's talk a little bit about, is that how we want to talk with each other? Is that how we want to be? So those media influences are really important to pay attention to.
Yeah, and Jason, I don't know whether this has been included in the materials here, but that would be another thing to consider in your own self-audit. Is not just how you're reacting, but what's playing constantly in the background, right? Do you have influences coming into the home like that? We talked in an earlier panel about cable news, and that cable news does have this formula for, activating our emotional response through fear and frustration and anger. Everything's breaking news all the time. Well, only so much news actually breaks, But it's like, oh no, it's breaking news. I've got to, conflict, the money that's made through this kind of fomenting conflict in certain media properties is a real thing. And I think we should be aware as families that that's a toxic influence and be careful about what's coming in our diet that way. That we suddenly got hands going up there. We have time for really one more question. I'm going to turn to Jefferson here on the front. Your hand went up.
Thanks for your work on this. Very needed. Is there I assume that this toolkit can apply to parents, families of all ages. Is there an optimal range of kids' age that this is best for?
Yeah, we grappled with it because we know that one of the just top principles of good parenting is age adaptation and age appropriate, right? And so you'd love to be able to just be customized all the way down to, right? We decided that what was probably best for this, I would say that there's a teen, preteen version there that's a bit more for older kids. And there are some places there where it'll get into kind of bullying and some other issues that might be a little more hefty. I'd say that the younger age is still grade school age children. So this doesn't necessarily go down into preschool or to that element. And some people would say, well, that's okay, that's not needed. We know there's a lot of foundations there, right? About how do you handle the squabble over the toy between, the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old. That does matter that we start to teach those principles. But for what we were able to do in this context, that's kind of our adaptation. I say there's kind of this grade school age kids and there's kind of the teen version of the program.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have a 15-minute break. People are going to be coming into this room for the final panel. So you'll want to maybe scoot in or make sure that there's room for people as they come in. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Carroll.